Phil actually took $500 off of Tiger. This was 1998. So Tiger is only a pro for basically a little over a year. And Phil won $500 and Tiger paid him in $100 bills. And not being content with just the bragging rights of that and the money, Phil took a picture of the $500 bills, wrote a note on it, "Dear Tiger, these Benjis are very happy in their new home. Thanks, Phil." And he put it in Tiger's locker.
Welcome back to the HeyUSA podcast. My name is Nick Garcia, senior reporter at PlayUSA, and joined with me as always is Brant James, lead writer of PlayUSA. Brant, we had the Derby this weekend. Final thoughts. What'd you think?
I had money on Epicenter. I was feeling pretty good, and all of a sudden this cruise missile came flying up the rail. No one knew what was happening. The announcer didn't even say Rich Strike. That is a tough name for me to say. Remember we talked about Derby winners that have good, powerful Derby names. Epicenter was good. Rich Strike, I can't say it. It's tough. Anyway, came flying along the rail. The announcer didn't even say the colt's name until he won, but 80-1, somebody had to have been happy.
The power of drone footage is so amazing. So I watched the aerial view on Twitter like shortly after the race aired, and it is just unbelievable. You know, they got the little pens showing you where Rich Strike is and Epicenter, and it's just another gear. Just seeing this little horse pass everyone, it's insane.
Absolutely. No doubt Sonny Leone's path was opened by some other horses, but the Red Sea did not just part. This happens a lot during races around the country, Tuesday afternoon at wherever, and you don't see it. This was a huge stage, but the path that opened and the path that Leone made was absolutely incredible to get down upon the rail and to hit, I don't know what gear that colt was in at that point in time.
I was speaking to some friends after it, and they're like, that guy was just completely covered in dust, and it was because he was in the very back just eating dirt the entire time. I don't know, I feel like it's one of those things where that doesn't, like you said, it doesn't happen very often, where the horse, he was just announced in the race the day prior.
Friday he got in because of another horse dropped out.
Do you know off the top of your head if a recently added horse has ever won the Derby? Has that ever happened before? You know what I mean? What I'm talking about?
No, I understand that. That's a good stat. I'd have to look that up. Probably, we think that everything has happened until something like this happens. 80-1. The jockey had never won a graded stakes before, so he comes in and wins the most important one of all. The horse was a claimer, a $30,000 claimer.
Yeah.
Just so many good stories.
We'll reach out to our resident horse advisor, Andrew Champagne, on that stat, and we'll report back on the next episode. But it was good. The Derby was nice. I had a good time. Had me some juleps. What can I say?
Outstanding. I wish I could have done that. I had gotten my COVID booster on Friday, so I spent it laying like that. I did manage to lean up and yell at the very last second because I'm counting on Epicenter to make me feel better.
Moving on. There is some news here in Chicago. Bally's Corporation was selected as the winner of the lone Chicago casino license, beating out local favorite Rush Street Gaming, who owns Rivers Casino, and Hard Rock down in Florida. So I consider this an upset because Rush Street, it's basically Rush Street's to lose. It was in their backyard, and somehow it was Bally's who came out with the winning bid. I mean, they offered $25 million up front. I don't know if that sweetened the pot a little bit, but they're definitely the ones that won. And it's going to be a game changer for the city. It has everything that you would want in a world-class resort. They're even talking about building a Chicago sports museum, rooftops, pool. It's on the river. What more could you ask for?
Yeah, that is right. It's quite an upset in Chicago. I mean, everything about that company, they emphasize that they're based there whenever you get a press release from them, and thanks for that, Rush Street. You had to have expected that. I guess competition is good, and maybe at some point they can wedge their way back into the market they probably thought they already controlled. But it's going to be, I can imagine, when they're two overly competitive recreational kickball teams play, it's going to be a little edgier there in Chicago.
It's going to be now, for listeners and viewers out there, doors don't open in the next year. So there's still a process that has to happen. Bali still has to have approval by the city council. The city council wasn't too happy how Lori Lightfoot selected the winner, so there may be a little back and forth there. And then after getting approval from the city, Bali's then has to go before the Illinois Gaming Board and get approved by them. So there's still a lengthy way before this is all said and done. They're expecting maybe a year and a half before it's finished. $2 billion price tag. So still a long way to go before gambling takes place.
Sounds like a lot of Chicago stuff could happen between now and then.
Yeah. I would say
that was actually my power bill. That's not an envelope full of cash. That's my power bill.
Those little envelopes, cash, got to be exchanged somehow. So, what else we got on the docket today?
I am excited. We are going to talk some golf. And if you're going to talk golf, you're going to talk about Tiger and you're going to talk about Phil. And if you're going to talk about Tiger and Phil, why don't you talk about a book that a friend and former coworker of mine wrote about Tiger and Phil? So we're going to bring on Bob Harig. We were colleagues at the former St. Petersburg Times. He's worked at ESPN. He's at SI.com now. Mm-hmm. Just published, well, he did not. Someone else published it. He just wrote a book called Tiger and Phil, Golf's Most Fascinating Rivalry. And I think that's a pretty factual title. Yeah. We're going to bring Bob on to talk about, I would imagine, one of the greatest dynamics and certainly the most interesting and important rivalry in modern golf.
Yeah. Well, let's do it.
All right, Bob. So obviously Tiger and Phil, two of the more compelling personalities and performers in golf in the last several decades. We know what we think we know about them from how they react with each other on the course. How does that actually, sync with the relationship and how these guys are at all times and how competitive are they with each other?
Well, I would say that has evolved. It's gone from, a good amount of animosity and friction and probably some pettiness and angst between them to a kind of a softening that occurred maybe, 5, 6, 7 years ago. As they got older, they gained more perspective. Tiger certainly had more perspective after he went through so many injuries, the back problems that he had. I think he all along, as time went on, he came to appreciate Phil more. He certainly respected him, but early on he might not have. Phil wasn't getting it done when Tiger was in the early days. And so that relationship has evolved. And now it's kind of come back to the point where I'm not so sure that they're very friendly. They find themselves on opposite ends of this rival golf league stuff that's going on in golf. And Phil's obviously involved in a lot of controversy over that. Tiger has clearly taken the side of the PGA Tour. He's not interested in bolting or looking beyond the PGA Tour. He's never really been very tight with Greg Norman. Tiger and Norman have sort of butted heads over the years. So Tiger would be on the opposite side of Phil on that, and I'm not sure he's extending any olive branches. So, the relationship kind of remains, I would say iffy. It's certainly never been close. It was amicable there for a few years, but here we are again. I mean, even at this late stage of their careers, I would say they're probably on opposite sides.
The rivalry that Tiger and Phil have, what other, dynamic or other rivalry out there would you kind of compare theirs to? Is it more, like a Duke, North Carolina? Is it, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning? What dynamic do they have? Or do they just stand on their own?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good question. I mean, Duke, Carolina is a hard one to compare to, I think, because they play so often. Yeah. And Tiger and Phil really didn't play that often. That's the thing we were deprived of. We were deprived of the head-to-head matchups. There really weren't that many of them, frankly. They were sort of in parallel universes competing in golf, but not always in the same group.
Gotcha.
It's only a handful of times really that occurred. Looking back on it, the PGA Tour actually, the way it works in golf is the first two rounds, they set up the pairings. And so you play with the same guys the first 2 days, early one day, late the next, and vice versa. And the tour purposely would put them apart. They would do that for reasons of crowd control, for TV. That meant that in the afternoon window, you'd have one or the other each day.
Yeah.
And Tiger and Phil hardly ever played together in the first 2 rounds. Well, that made it even that much more difficult for them to play later in the tournament because the pairings are based on score and based on when you finish. Mm-hmm. And unless they were absolutely first and second in the tournament, they weren't going to be grouped together that often. So that, I think, hurts it. It's more of like I think it was probably more of a magic bird thing. Those guys didn't play very often. They did not play against each other very often, but obviously it was intense. And, I think there's a stat I point out. Tiger, we all know, was number 1 in the world for the longest period of anybody, more than 600 weeks. Phil was number 2 in the world for 270 weeks, all of them with Tiger number 1. Like, while Tiger was above everybody else, Phil was the clear number 2.
Yeah.
And Phil's way better than anybody else. And so in terms of their head-to-head, we just didn't get it enough. But they were the guys who were there the most. And if you look at their records, Phil has to wonder sometimes, what might it have been like had there been no Tiger? Because his record, we gloss over it. That's one of the things I try to do in the book is give Phil his due, because his record doesn't get highlighted as much because when you compare it to Tiger, it doesn't look that great, but it's way better than anybody else's. There's nobody playing golf today who's active other than Tiger under the age of 50 who has 25 PGA Tour wins. Dustin Johnson is 24. Wow. Phil has 45. So Phil is 21 ahead of the next active player not named Tiger Woods. Yeah. It's pretty remarkable.
That story about them not being paired together is an incredible story, but seems so completely counterintuitive in this current age of branding and, getting the guys on the screen together. You can still do that with TV, but not having the 2 guys together like that. I'm sure it's great for the guy holding the rope on the 10th green or whatever, not getting run over by fans. But that is incredible. Not having the 2 stars together like that is crazy. But do you think, how far did they, but they certainly must have known like how the other guy was doing. How much did one go into pushing the other? Because there's got to be murmurs that Phil just did this or Tiger just did that. I mean, as far as elevating each other, that 1 versus 2 dynamic that you were talking about.
There's no question that Phil says Tiger did a lot to force him to get better. He wonders where he might have been with no Tiger, but he also wonders if he wouldn't have worked as hard had there been no Tiger. He knew that Tiger forced him to get better. And the thing that's really interesting about their careers and the parallels of their careers, obviously Phil's older, and Phil was, that's another thing. Phil was Tiger before Tiger. These are 2 guys who had tremendous hype as amateur players and exceeded it. How often does that happen in sports? We see a young guy come along, we think he's going to be great, and he doesn't quite pan out. Yeah. Tiger and Phil both panned out. I mean, Tiger was famous from a young age. Well, so was Phil. Maybe not to the level of Tiger in terms of not being on TV shows like Tiger was, but Phil was winning everything as a junior player. He was very, very well known in San Diego. He still holds the record for most American Junior Golf Association victories. He had more than Tiger did even. Went to Arizona State, won 3 NCAA titles, won a tour event as an amateur, the last amateur to do so. He did that in 1991. He won the Tucson Open when he was a junior in college. And no amateur has won on the PGA Tour since. Tiger didn't even do that. Tiger never even sniffed a pro win. So Phil came out with a lot of fanfare. He won 9 times before Tiger turned pro. And then Tiger came out and just took the world by storm and kind of blew by him. Tiger had 8 majors and Phil at one point had 0. I mean, it's incredible to think that Phil had a head start. Tiger came out, 8 majors, Phil none. But Phil started to finally figure it out. He didn't win his first major until he was 33 years old. And at that point, I think Tiger already had 12 or 13, So, I mean, it was pretty amazing to think that, how different they were in that regard. But Tiger slowly began to realize that Phil was a threat. He was a thorn in his side. I point out in the book that at the 2006 Masters, Phil won that. Tiger finished second. To this day, it remains a huge regret of Tiger's. He really, really wanted to win that Masters because his dad was dying. His dad, Earl, who had a big impact on his career, passed away a month later. And Tiger knew that his dad was in poor shape and wasn't going to make it much longer. And he really, really wanted to win for him. And it was Phil who won. And Tiger who had to put the green jacket on him because Tiger had won the Masters in 2005. They actually traded him in 2004, 2005, and 2006.
Yeah.
So, there was a healthy amount of back and forth between them in those days, even if they weren't always paired together.
A lot has been made. A lot of documentaries, a lot of books have been written about Magic and Bird and what they as a competing tandem did for the NBA. If you, even though Tiger and Phil were competing in a vacuum, sort of, in golf most weekends, if they weren't in the equation, where is golf now without them? Or did their sort of weight of personality overshadow someone else that might have filled that? Someone would have. Yeah. There would have been a star. There always is. But how would them have not being there changed the game?
Yeah, it's a good question because you wonder if somebody would have filled the void to the level that they did. They won so much that there wasn't much left for anybody else. But there were some other players during that time. Vijay Singh, is a Hall of Famer. He won 34 PGA Tour events. Basically all of them during this period. In fact, in 2004, Vijay Singh won, I believe it was 9 times that year. I mean, he had an incredible year. He got to number 1 in the world ahead of Tiger. Ernie Els is another guy who had a Hall of Fame career, who got a lot done during their time. In fact, he finished second to Tiger more often than anybody in majors. Retief Goosen was a highly ranked player who won a couple of majors in there. Padraig Harrington, but would they have stepped up and won even more? It's hard to say. I mean, the Tiger-Phil dynamic is sort of especially Tiger. There's a little bit of a blessing and a curse with it because they were so dominant that people wanted to tune in. But when they're not around, was there a fall off? And we've seen that. We saw that when Tiger didn't play in 2016, 2017, he didn't play the whole year, each year due to his back problems. Sure, there was a wane in interest. But golf then just kind of settled back into an area that it always holds, which is it has its niche audience. It has an audience that's fairly popular. And it's just that it spikes when it's Tiger. We just saw it at the Masters. I mean, it was incredible, the interest in him just to come back, knowing that he probably wouldn't be competitive. The interest in him, it's almost like an outlier. You almost can't count it. I mean, has he dragged some people along with him into the sport going back 25 years? Probably, but maybe not to the level that all the powers that be would have ever hoped.
Yeah, I saw Tiger's name when that was announced and just instantly put a $5 bet on him. Just seeing the name made me want to do that. But no, that is an interesting point because you think of, Peyton Manning always said if it wasn't for Tom Brady, I would have won more. Or you think about if Michael Jordan wasn't there, do the Pistons become the dominant force in the NBA? Does Patrick Ewing finally win an NBA title? So it's interesting to kind of think about it that way. It's like, if these two guys weren't there, who would have filled the void? Do you think, of course, these two stand alone. There's never going to be a replica of these guys. But is there like one individual that you kind of see that's moving up and could kind of take the, fill the void once these guys decide to, hang up the clubs?
I'm not sure that's going to happen, to be honest with you. The problem is it's good news, bad news. The problem is there's a lot of parity in golf today. A guy, Scotty Scheffler, who won the Masters, has won 4 times this year, which is great. Can he keep that going? I think there's a lot of interest to see if he can. Could he add a 5th or a 6th win this season? That would be tremendous. I think that's what golf needs. Golf needs unlike team sports where we like it when there's parity because it means our team is never far away. You know, it means our team has a chance every year. We like that. That's what's great about the NFL, frankly. You know, in theory, your team should never be that far away from contending because of the way it's set up. In golf, I think you like a superstar to emerge. You don't like parity. And we have a little bit too much parity right now. Scheffler won the Masters. He's the number one in the world. Until 2 weeks before the Masters, John Rahm was number one in the world for months. Rahm had not won since the U.S. Open last June. He finally just won in Mexico a couple weeks ago. It's his first win in 10 months. And yet he was number one in the world. It showed that his results were good, but that he wasn't winning. You know, Patrick Cantlay won a couple of times at the end of last year. He was the PGA Tour Player of the Year. He didn't win this year until he won a team event with Xander Schauffele in New Orleans. He gets credit for that. Colin Morikawa is 25. He's already won 2 majors, but he hasn't won this year. Justin Thomas, great player, hasn't won this year. Dustin Johnson hasn't won. And he, you know, in 2020, when he won the Masters, everybody thought he was going to keep winning forever. So the game has a lot of top players, but it doesn't have anybody emerging, you know, and that's a good thing we took for granted with Tiger. To win 4 times in a year is amazing. Phil did that, I believe, 3 times. He never won more than 4 times in a year. Tiger won 5 times or more 10 times. I mean, it's incredible to think of that. He had 10 5-victory seasons. That's 50 wins alone right there. Nobody has 50 wins, you know? So, you know, to find somebody who's going to step up and match that, I'm not sure it can happen. I think it's, and that's not knocking Tiger and Phil. It's not like they didn't have competition either. But to forge ahead is really difficult.
Tiger and Phil participated in the match in 2020, as we'll recall, that heavily gamblified, made-for-TV event. Bob, I know we've spoken about this before, but just if you could share again, just golf and gambling from dudes on the tee, probably all the way back to the invention of the game, to the PGA embracing it. Why does gambling and golf seem to go so hand in hand, and why was golf so able and willing to embrace it from the beginning?
Well, the reason it works, I think, is because, first of all, the game that's played that we see the most stroke play is not the way most people play golf. Most people play match play. It's head to head. And so what's the most common form of gambling in golf among us average people? You know, a $5 Nassau might be called. That means $5 for the front, $5 for the back, $5 for the overall. Then you might have presses if you get down. Some people will play automatic 2. If you're 2 down on the front, you automatically, that invokes another press. Or some people play automatic 1 downs, which means now you've got another bet going for that entire 9 holes, and then it ends at the 9. Golf lends itself to gambling so much. I'm surprised it took this long, frankly, for it to get this way. Because in pro golf, for us to bet on it, yes, of course they play stroke play, but we can bet on who's going to beat who in a group, who's going to lead after the first round, who might shoot the highest score, you know, how many birdies somebody might make, how many eagles, if there's an ace. There's so many aspects to golf that you can bet on. And it's surprising to me that we've actually kind of taken a while to get to the point of embracing it. You know, at golf tournaments I go to, it's very, very common for spectators to sit by a green, and a couple of guys will get together and they'll say, all right, I'm taking so-and-so to hit it closest to the pin. You know, and I mean, just as rudimentary as that, you know, and you see them exchanging dollars or $5 bills or whatever, you know, all right, I've got, you know, Tiger's going to hit it closest to the pin on this hole, and whoever hits it closer wins. It gets down to those basics in golf. And so, you know, I think it lends itself nicely. Now, just the straight up betting on a tournament, you know, like you're going to try to pick a winner. That to me is one of the hardest things there is in sports. How do you pick a winner? A couple of weeks ago, Rahm in Mexico was, I guess he would have been the equivalent of 4-1, 5-1. I think his odds were 450. That is Tiger-like low. I mean, to think that you're going to actually bet on a guy and only get 4-1 and he has to beat 140 guys, that's pretty hard. Yeah. But yet he did it. He won. I mean, and Tiger routinely had low odds like that in his prime because he was so good. There used to be bets Tiger or the field. You'd be a fool to not take the field, but still Tiger would upset that sometimes, Even it's like somebody like this week, Scotty Scheffler is the favorite at the event in Dallas. I think he might be, like 10-1 or something like that. Is he really can I really be confident that he's going to win? I think there's so many other aspects to golf that make more sense. In the UK, they have the each way bet, which is not only winning, but finishing in the top 4, the top 5, depending on the betting shop, top 6 or 7. And they give you a quarter of the odds for that. That to me makes more sense. I'm willing to more look at a guy. Can he finish in the top 5? To bet on a guy to win, man, that is tough. I try to pick him every week. And, if I was putting any amount of money on that, I don't think I'd be lasting too long.
I think I need to do more golf betting. I'm doing it wrong.
We have a strong inclination that Phil likes to make it interesting.
Oh yeah,
with a couple of bucks.
Yeah,
read a couple of things, a couple of places. Is that a Tiger thing too? I mean, they had some jabber back and forth during the match, but is he there too?
No,
I mean, do we know?
Not to any public knowledge. Tiger, in terms of golf betting, all right, just Phil and gambling is a whole nother issue. Obviously, there's some issues with him right now because he's believed to have bet large sums on gambling in general. But kind of the good-natured side of Phil was the golf gambling. And I actually highlight some of these stories in the book where, nobody relished a Tuesday practice round gambling game more than Phil. He thought that was a great way to prepare for the tournament. In fact, I have a story in there once where he was he was playing with a couple of guys at a tournament and they just had a simple, they're playing straight up stroke play. And I believe the number was like $1,000. And whoever finished last had to pay the guy in front of them. And whoever, so in other words, if you finished dead last, you had to pay $1,000 to the guy in front of you and then $1,000 to the winner. There's 3 of them. And if you were in second, you had to pay $1,000 to the guy in front of you. Jeez. And one of the guys balked. He only wanted to play for 100 instead of 1,000. And Phil said, "Are you kidding me?" He goes, "On Sunday, if you're in contention, you're going to be playing for $1 million. But you can't gamble $1,000 of your own money right now." I mean, in other words, that's what you need to learn how to be ready to play for that kind of money. Yeah. So he basically shamed the guy into doing it and, of course, beat him. But there were several other stories along those lines of Phil playing practice rounds and loving to get into the action on a Tuesday because he thought it sharpened him. He thought it focused him. He wasn't just out there going through the motions. And Tiger was the opposite. I have a story in the book about early on where the two of them played a practice round together, and Phil actually took $500 off of Tiger. This was 1998, so Tiger is only a pro for basically a little over a year. And Phil won $500, and Tiger paid him in $100 bills. And not being content with just the bragging rights of that and the money, Phil took a picture of the $500 bills, wrote a note on it, "Dear Tiger, these Benjis are very happy in their new home. Thanks, Phil." And he put it in Tiger's locker. Now, whether or not this was a coincidence or not, they never played a practice round together for 20 years. That was the last time until 2018 that they played a practice round together. So I don't think it was all solely based on that, but it clearly didn't go over very well with Tiger, at least in the short term.
Phil sounds like kind of like a hustler. I like it. Just like shaming people in the gambling. That's good. I like that. It's good stuff.
Gambling is a sports motivation and skill sharpening. That's beautiful.
No doubt. I'm not very good at the golf gambling part, but it's gotten bigger, man. They're going to they might run into some issues out there when spectators can get so close, and you know how they can be if their guy doesn't do it.
Yeah.
I think that's the one thing they have to worry about. Maybe that's something to talk about down the road.
You know Kevin Love from the Cavaliers? Well, not know him personally. He's a freaking basketball player. I was asking him the same question. He's like, people will like text him or DM him, or like they'll yell from the crowds like, "Hey, you want me $300?" Or like, "I couldn't make my rent last week, you mother."
Well, I
definitely want to hear that.
Fantasy football guys complaining about it. The same thing is bound to happen in golf, where especially as close as the spectators get and as we're allowed to gamble on these events as they're taking place. I mean, there's things that are going to come along, I think, where you can, like I was talking about, just guys in the gallery hitting it close. You're going to be able to do that for real. Yeah. Hitting, a guy shooting a lower score on the hole, or, that kind of thing. And then when it doesn't happen in real time, you could possibly see the abuse coming, from the gallery. Yep. That's the one thing that they have to be careful about.
I think it's way tougher with the individual sports too. Golf, tennis, whatever, where it's all up to you.
Yeah. And like that guy wants to miss that shot or doesn't want to make that putt, he's happy, it's kind of silly.
Yeah. His sponsor is totally into him missing that shot.
Exactly.
Is this book out now? Can I go buy it?
It is.
It's right here on Amazon. I got it clicked up.
I think I need to do that. This sounds great.
It is out.
Again, that was Bob Harig, author of Tiger and Phil, Golf's Most Fascinating Rivalry. And if you didn't think it was, I think you do now. Bob is a knowledgeable golf writer, longtime veteran, has some great stories. There's going to be a whole bunch of those in the book. I feel like I'm just going to click right here on Amazon and go get my own. What about you, Nick?
Definitely buying that book. It sounds really good. Anytime that another guy can shame another man into betting $1,000, I'm sold. So
it's a good practice. It's very, very good. You should do that every day.
We'll have some stories linked in the description. Go check out Bob's book. Like, follow, subscribe. We'll catch you guys next week.